Hey, what's up, mortals? It's Miggy Sawdust here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 14 of What If Izuku Got One for All Early. Just wanted to greet you all by just saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. Let's begin. Adrenaline pumped through Muscular's body. His body mass grew. His muscle fibers sprouted out from under his skin. It was a grotesque sight to behold. Izuku kept up his full cowling. He had a child's life resting in the palm of his hands. He wasn't about to let the bastard get to it. In another location, Sero made his way back to the main building, where he knows he'll be safe. Passing by the clearing, he sees Mandalay and screams at her. "Mandalay, Midoriya told me to tell you he went to go get Koda. He's in a clearing at the mountain." Mandalay then uses her quirk to telepathically message everyone.
"Students, the situation seems dire. Just to be safe, since there are so many strong attackers, you all have permission to use your quirks."
She then sends the private message to Koda and Izuku. "Are you boys all right? Sorry I can't get to you sooner, but I'll be there as quickly as I can." Back at the clearing, Izuku and Koda are standing their ground against this mighty foe. They both reacted when Mandalay relayed her message. It gave them both courage. It was a massive weight off their chest knowing help would come. Izuku's train of thought was interrupted by a fist aimed straight towards him at an immense velocity. He barely had any time to push Koda out of the way and raise his arms, resisting the blunt force from Muscular. "You better start paying attention, you little shit!" An immense tingling shot out of Izuku's nerves, followed by a sharp pain running up his shoulders and forearms. His whole body was pushed back a few meters from the continuous weight forced on him. There was barely any floor left Izuku could use as leverage, only a very long fall. Muscular kept pushing the kid forward, trying to shove him off the cliff, though it was interrupted by Izuku's next move. He ducked below the muscle-clad fist, moving under the arm, and Midoriya ran one for all at 40%. He bear-hugged both Muscular's calves and lifted him off the ground, pushing him forward and slamming his head into the floor. "Oh no, you don't, brat!" Muscular clamped his fingers together, intertwining both of his fists into one, before slamming his hands down on Izuku's head. Everything went black for Izuku for a second. It grew hard to move as his consciousness was fading. Izuku had no choice but to loosen his grip. That's when the bulky titan grasped the student's shirt and chucked him into the side of the mountain. Izuku's body left a crater as it bounced off the rock, spitting up any moisture that sat in his lungs. In mid-bounce, Muscular rushed the kid, charging with his shoulder and slammed Izuku back into the wall, punching his face over and over. He followed up with knees to the ribcage, snapping them one by one. "Let's do your arms next!" The blonde, one-eyed freak smiled with great malice. His muscle fibers wrapped around his body in great mass, increasing his physical prowess and appearance further. He clenched his fist around Deku's forearms and began bending them in the wrong directions like twigs. Izuku shouted out in horror before his face lit up again. He headbutted the bodybuilder wannabe right in the chest with 100%. A massive dust cloud formed from the two of them, and all Koda could do is watch in astonishment and terror. What was left when the smoke cleared was a highly reinforced muscled-out ball of flesh, and a iridescent-haired student with a bruised neck. Muscular simply relaxed some of his pectoral muscles, and laughed maniacally while doing so. "Now that was very funny, boy. You got one hell of a head there. How desperate to use your quirk that way, though. We've already done background checks on all you brats." He grabbed Izuku by the top of his hair, pulling his upper body by his scalp, practically laughing in his face. "You see, I'm not looking for you, but a blonde brat who our old boss had a run-in with earlier. You seen him? Katsuki Bakugo, I mean." Izuku's eyes lit up, but his deformed jaw couldn't move. His trembling breath could barely give out comprehensive words. Muscular once again chuckled from the pitiful sight before him. He stood up with the boy's hair in hand, before slamming him to the floor over and over. "You better give me the answer I need before you die, boy!" The brutality of Muscular's inappropriate treatment of a child was sickening. Izuku's face continued to deform from its usual appearance. His eyes bulged out and bruised, and his cheeks were gashed with deep purple. Though this didn't slow down the merciless trash of a human being. He let Izuku bounce off the floor before he grasped his calf, holding him upside down and threw him like a rag doll across the floor. Izuku's kneecap snapped in the process, twisting his shin out of place as he rolled across the floor. The friction between Midoriya and the floor is what made him decelerate to a stop right in front of Koda.
Look at him dawdle about. Come on, hero. No sleeping on the job.
Koda gazed down upon his self-sacrificing savior, or what was left of him. The terrible sight of Izuku before him siphoned the little kid of all hope and oxygen. There wasn't even enough air to cry for help, only breathless tears. Koda felt like he was going to pass out, but mustered enough courage to use his quirk. He sprayed Izuku down gently with his water quirk, cleansing his body of the bloody mess he was. With Izuku unconscious, his body suffered too much damage to even comprehend the pain his body was going through. In his psyche, there was only a dark cloud that he was shrouded in. At the core of this never-ending cloud that expanded out into the horizons were 6 colorless silhouettes, outshining the darkness. Toshinori was the only one out of the 6 that had any detail to them. "Hey, kid."
All Might."
"Yeah, it's me. I've been watching your fight. We all have. Seeing you try your hardest like that brings me nothing but a sore heart, kid. If only I was still around, you wouldn't have to push as hard as you have been." Izuku stood there for a few moments, his eyes rushed with tears, slowly breaking down in front of his predecessor and friend. Toshinori simply approached the broken-down adolescent, wrapping his arms around him. "I know it's tough, kid, but this isn't my fight anymore. It's yours. All you can do is protect one person at a time. Just don't forget to cherish your own life as well. You're our hopes, Izuku Midoriya. All for one may be gone now, but that doesn't mean villainy is, so long as the sins of humanity flourish and get the better of us." Izuku couldn't help but let out all of his sorrows in the form of tears onto All Might's torso. Toshinori patted his back before subtly transforming into someone else. "Chin up, kid. You're not dead yet." That voice. It wasn't familiar to Izuku. He paused the waterworks before letting go. He looked up at who the voice came from. A tall, bald man. Another holder of One for All? So you're the young man who took on as number 7. Is that right? I see you're in quite the pickle, facing a foe far beyond yourself. Well then, guess you'll have to push past your limits, huh? My name's Diagoro Banjo, otherwise known as the 5th user of One for All. Izuku wiped the tears from his eyes, listening to what this stranger had to say.
Diagoro Banjo. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm the 7th. And yeah, I'm in quite the bind."
We're gonna have to speed this up. You don't have much time before that rapscallion makes mincemeat out of that kid you're protecting. What I'm about to bestow upon you is my quirk, Black Whip. I won't go into too much detail, but it should be enough for you to face this mighty foe. Use it and win, young man. Midoriya woke up with Koda next to him, gasping for air. Koda's eyes were filled with tears and surprise. Izuku hadn't yet caught up with reality and was wondering what was happening. He looked down to see that his body was wrapped up in black, mystical wiring swirling around him. Black Whip surrounded Izuku, forcing his limbs back into place. The pain was excruciating. He began yelling as Black Whip tightened itself, forcing bones to snap back in place and forced joints to face the right way. Soon the pain stopped and Muscular laughed maniacally.
You woke up and are just now feeling the damage I've done to you, hero. Ha! What a laugh. Yes, please scream more. It only fuels my want to slaughter the likes of you. I hope you're ready for round 2.
Izuku's body knit itself back to normal, but only because of Black Whip keeping his body that way. Izuku stood back up slowly. It was as if there was nothing out of place or broken, and his body felt easy enough to move. Muscular grew a smile only a deranged mother could love. He leaped off the floor, leaving behind a shockwave, blowing Koda back against the wall. The borderline meatball dive bombed from the air to land on Izuku. However, the determined hero leaped out of the way, letting Muscular create a crater. He prepared himself for the blonde's next upcoming attack. However, much to Izuku's dismay, he charged the other direction towards Koda. He slapped the kid, his entire hand big enough to hit his whole body from the point of impact at once, and he flew into the rubble. Blood dripped from the child, drooling onto the floor, creating a puddle. Midoriya stood there in disbelief. Tears rolled out from his eyelids. He began walking towards the kid while Muscular laughed and charged at Koda again. Lightning from One for All rushed out of Izuku's eyes, and in an instant he appeared in the air in front of Muscular. He hooked his foot around the back of the crazed villain's neck, slamming him to the floor with a kick. Muscular spat out blood and Izuku grappled his torso.
How the hell did you get stronger all of a sudden?
Muscular's body mass increased once again, with the slivers of muscle fibers wrapping around his body. Izuku followed up with a barrage of combo attacks. Thanks to Black Whip wrapping itself around Izuku's broken fingers, his punches had an extra oomph about them. This dissipated the newly acquired muscle fibers that Muscular was trying to accumulate. The crazed killer bled behind his teeth as he smirked. He cut Midoriya's combos short by grabbing his arm and twisting it. However, it wouldn't budge due to Black Whip. Izuku merely cranked everything to 100%, and roundhouse kicked the bastard in his cranium. The sound of bone cracking under the pressure roared off a mountainside. Even the crazed villain's slivers of flesh protection remained powerless to Izuku's mighty roundhouse. Muscular flew into the mountain and bounced off the rocky surface of the cliffside. Izuku gave no time for rest and punched into his stupidly oversized pectoral muscles, his fists flying through the flesh just before hitting the skin, and slammed Muscular to the ground. Izuku screamed in rage, his body pumped full of adrenaline, and the 100% of All for One coursing through his body broke him more and more as he continued brutalizing Muscular in the most unheroic methods possible. The blood-soaked child finished by kicking straight through his abs and out his back before stomping him to the ground. What followed was unbalanced and wild breaths of air coming from Izuku. He stepped back from the dead villain. His upper body went limp as he screamed to the sky. His legs shook with great tenacity, as if they were about to give way. Koda slowly regained his consciousness, slowly lifting himself off the floor, and raising his head to face his hero, standing tall before him. There were no fatal injuries on Koda, only some blood loss from a scrape to the head and a twisted-up arm. He slowly stood up and limped his way over to his hero, hugging him silently. A few minutes passed. Koda was sitting on the floor, giving the barely conscious Izuku time to recover. Black Whip was still holding Midoriya together, forcing his skeleton into place. He was still pumped full of adrenaline, but at least he got his breathing under control. It helped that Black Whip held his broken ribs together, keeping them away from his lungs.
We need to go back, Koda.
Izuku's words were slurred, panting in between as few syllables as he could. His jaw may be forced back into place, but it still hurt to talk. He walked over to the child and picked him up.
But you're so badly hurt.
Koda shed tears for his hero. He didn't know what to say or how to thank him. All he could think about is his health, the bad condition he was in, heartbreaking to the young child.
That doesn't matter right now, Koda. We need to get you to safety, and Bakugo's in trouble.
Koda thought back to the blonde kid who had talked to him before. He's also Izuku's friend, so he's also important.
If he's in trouble, you can't save him, dummy. Look at yourself.
Izuku ignored the young man and rushed back to the camp at 40%, carrying Koda with him. He couldn't risk damaging his body further at 100. His head went wandering, the reality of what happened back there not quite catching up to Izuku.
Today I saved a life, but I ended one as well.
A few minutes ago, back in the main building when the attack started, Aizawa tells Vlad King to keep the remedial students safe and to call the authorities. He makes his way outside where waiting for him is a blast of fire. Aizawa barely managed to leap out of the way in time. However, the fire still simmered Eraser's forearm.
Wow, boss was right. You are cool.
Shigaraki comes out chuckling under his breath from behind.
See? I told you he was cool.
Dabi shrugged, his stapled mouth twisted into a sly smirk. I just had to see it for myself was all, boss. Shigaraki turned to Aizawa.
How's your elbow from USJ, Eraser?
Aizawa used his binding cloth to hit the two villains' heads together. Aizawa then hits both of them with his knees.
Bad move.
Shigaraki had his hand clasped around Eraser's knee, decaying it. Eraser immediately activated his quirk on him, keeping the decay from spreading further. The clone of the chap villain leader melted. Its usefulness faltered when Eraser rid itself from the quirk. The real Shigaraki stood by the entrance and touched the building. It started to crumble. Aizawa turns to the building, in shock at what's happening, as behind him, Dabi shoots a blast of fire. Aizawa jumped out of the way, managing to evade. He looks at the villain which blocked his quirk and attacked Dabi. His fist flew through Dabi's head like butter, however, and the rest of the blue flame conjurer melted into a goop shortly after.
Wrong again, Eraser.
The building continued to crumble, and the students in it fall to the ground. Aizawa follows the footprints of the clones towards where Twice and Dabi were hiding. Dabi noticed Aizawa approaching and shot fire at him. Aizawa evades with an aerial flip off a tree. Twice was slow to react to Eraser and stared into his eyes. The clones fell into nothing but schlop. This set off alarms for Eraserhead. So you're the one doing that, huh? Aizawa approached closer to Twice, hitting him over the head, knocking him out before he could react. Back at the building, Vlad King gets up as the students are recovering from falling from a second story. He sees Shigaraki, the real one, and attacks him. Shigaraki manages to evade and uses his decay quirk on Vlad King, breaking his support gear, then making his way to Vlad King's arm. Shigaraki smiled as Vlad King screamed from the pain of his arm crumbling. Blood flowed down from the decapitating arm of Vlad King. He used this opportunity to shoot his blood out and solidify it, encapsulating most of Shigaraki's body with it. The villain's chapped lips curled into a crooked smile. He collapsed all 5 fingers on the solid blood, causing it to decay from existence, freeing himself. Shigaraki makes his way towards Vlad King and crouches, touching Vlad and siphoned off his quirk.
Now that I have your quirk, I have no use for you. It's time for you to drop dead now.
Shigaraki started at the foot. The decay spread slowly. The toes died before breaking off. It was as if there was no liquid in his body to support his appendages. The decay kept on climbing its way up towards Vlad. All he could do was scream in silence as his innards sprawled on the floor before turning to dust. His head was the last thing to go, and by then he was far gone already. Shigaraki then makes his way to the remedial students, and others that went to the main building to seek refuge. Manama stood there in utter silence and disbelief of the death of his teacher. Tears riled up before rage took over.
Sensei!
In another location, Todoroki and Sero are having trouble fighting Moonfish. Sero is holding a Class B student who passed out, while Todoroki tries to fight Moonfish using a combination of his ice and fire. Moonfish just breaks the ice, and the steel teeth absorb the heat. Todoroki throws a huge iceberg to block the path. Run. There's only one way I can think of beating him, and I need everybody else at a safe distance. Sero grudgingly makes a break for it, doing what he's told as he swings between the tree branches with his tape. He was en route to the main building. Moonfish makes his way through the ice, but once he gets through it, he is met by a hot flash, knocking him into the air and slamming him into a tree. Katsuki Bakugo was on the other end of that bright shockwave, smirking as if he was egging for a real fight. Todoroki simply stared at the atomic blonde before smiling. Guess you are the rambunctious sort. Glad to have you here, Bakugo. Bakugo held in his hands miniature sparks of eruptions blasting from his palm.
Can it, Icy Hot? I'm only rambunctious when I feel like it. Now time to take out this ridiculous bastard!
Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed that. Before we leave, we'd just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today, so goodbye and have a divine day.